Hello, One Song Nation. Diallo Riddle here. A quick reminder that this is the second part of our Daft Punk special. If you haven't already heard part one, I suggest you go back and listen before you enjoy this monumental episode and bathe in the glory of some Nile Rodgers isolated guitar stems, Pharrell's vocals, and our favorite Daft Punk samples of all time. This is One Song. Welcome back to One Song Luxury. Tell us the story of how Get Lucky got composed.
Story begins in New York, where Nile Rodgers meets up with the boys from Daft Punk, with Thomas and Guy-Man, who are now men, I suppose. This is a little bit later. This is 2008. They had met before 10 years earlier at a record release party. Nile Rodgers was already a fan. He loved that first track to Funk, one of the first singles from Homework. Yeah. In any case, he meets up with Daft Punk. They talk about working together. And one of the themes for the album that the boys had been discussing, les gars, if you will, with my français, they wanted to make an album as though the internet never existed. That was the mission statement. So they had started and they already had a demo, and it sounded a little bit like this. I think it's interesting to hear pre-Nile Rodgers. You can hear everything but guitar and vocals on this early take. And this is actually on Spotify. It's called GL Early Take. So what's interesting about that is that it's more complicated, right? They have this B section. There's no B section in the song.
No.
Get Lucky is a 4-chord loop the entire time. And here they were trying to maybe be a little more clever and creative and perhaps channeling this 70s yacht rock thing where maybe the Doobie Brothers might throw in, or the Beach Boys might throw in some fancy chords, Burt Bacharach style. And that shows up here in this earlier demo of it. So I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. It's almost like, I'm glad that they made it more dancier
and simplified it.
You know, my only criticism of Random Access is that there are times where it just doesn't feel like you're hanging out with the group that you know.
Yeah,
you know,
it's a different listening. It's more of a listening record than a dancing and DJing record.
And listen, this album has great moments, but I'm happy that they made it more chic and a little less. No, I meant the band chic. I wish I was.
I thought that was a pun.
No, it wasn't a pun.
They made it chic by making it more like, well, you can talk about the pristine sonic qualities make it feel chic. It does feel like an object for your home, almost more. Look, we're not dissing the song. We adore this band. You know that. But this record, Random Access Memories, is so different from the others. And you've heard us talking about our adoration for the music as DJs, as producers. Like this music is in our bones. This record is a little bit more of a like aesthetic experience.
It's a different kind of album.
Yeah.
There are songs on this album that I absolutely love. I'm happy that they made Get Lucky a little bit more dancey.
So Nile took what we just heard, that demo, and he took it apart and rewrote it essentially and came up with his now iconic guitar parts. And he also wrote a couple other tracks, Lose Yourself to Dance, and he was part of Give Life Back to Music. But essentially the song...
I love Lose Yourself to Dance.
Oh yeah, what about that track do you like?
I just love it. I remember that actually the first time I heard someone else listening to it.
Yeah.
I was in traffic, and I was driving, and I was in traffic driving, and I look over to my right, and there's like a car full of people younger than me, but they were all like just like grooving to it, like
losing
really
hard.
To dance. And I was like, and we talk about repetition, like that song is repetitious.
Oh my God.
And
vocoder power,
you know, come on. Like, but there's just something really groovy about it. While we're talking about the album writ large, I think my favorite song on the album, surprisingly, I think I'm going to surprise some people with this. My favorite song on that album is Doing It Right featuring Panda Bear. Here's just a second of that. But yeah, I love that. I mean, I think, you know, yeah, that song does it for me.
I mean, if we're talking favorite songs, then I got to give my By Julian some love.
This one? Okay. Oh, interesting. Go for it.
Huge Strokes fan. Huge Daft Punk fan, as we've been discussing. I love that they have the kind of vocoder on him because there isn't. I think on every song the robots have a little part, like
they have a little bit to sing.
Daft Punk as an artist on this record's appearance is mostly in their modular synths and their vocoder. They show up in almost every song.
And they usually show up in the second half of the song, which is interesting.
They put a little part in there. Yeah. But I love this one. The one part that makes me laugh, though, as a person, as a songwriter myself, is whenever I hear the chorus, it reminds me of what you're doing in the vocal booth when you don't have lyrics written yet and you have a melody and you just sort of say whatever comes in your head. I'll just play it and maybe that'll make sense.
Is he singing lyrics?
That's kind of my point. There's like one line where he's like, and I never really know what to say. Like I do that all the time. I'll be in the studio. I'll be like in my home studio, like working on something like, I don't really know what comes here, but I'm going to have a lyric at some point.
What was the Marvin Gaye lyric? It was something sanctified.
Right. Marvin, why don't you do something sanctified?
something sanctified.
Something like sanctified.
Something like sanctified. Yeah, exactly.
Something like sanctified.
I love that. I love that. Let's get back to Get Lucky.
Okay.
We have the stems, folks. So let's start with the drums. What do you want to play for us?
Well, let's start with the drums. This is famous drummer Omar Hakim, who's been in Weather Report. He was on Let's Dance, David Bowie,
dope.
Foo Fighters, Sting, Madonna, Kate Bush, Miles Davis, you name it. He's been on this record and he's on Get Lucky. And then, so that drum beat, that really simple 4 to the floor drum beat, 116 BPM, goes through the whole tune. And there's one part at the end when the vocoder comes in where it's layered with a drum machine. And you can hear them both playing at the same time. It's the 16th notes in the hi-hat.
Yeah, let's
You'll hear that just in a moment.
What's wild is it almost sounds like Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, like, Janet Jackson a little bit.
The drum machine is probably, could be a Lynn, is probably something from that era.
Yeah.
Could literally be the same hi-hats.
You can hear it. You can hear the era poking through.
Yeah. Let's move on to Nathan East on bass. One of the most recorded bass players in history, by the way.
Who has he worked with?
He has worked with Michael Jackson, a host of people including MJ, Stevie Wonder, Herbie Hancock, and he's also, fun fact, a co-writer of the two Phils, I should say, right? Phil Bailey, and who's the other Phil?
Phil Collins.
Easy Lover.
Apparently, I saw this fact the other day. Phil Collins had more top 40 hits in the 1980s, if you count his work with Genesis, than any other artist.
Is that true?
Yeah, apparently.
Wow.
I would have never guessed that until you're like, oh yeah, Phil Collins is like that forgotten dude from the 80s who, like, everybody knows Michael, Prince, Madonna. But
Phil was there
too.
Phil
was there the whole time. He may not always have number 1, but he's got 37 on lock. He's got 28 on lock. And Easy Lover is quietly one of my favorite songs of all time.
That's a great tune.
It's a goofy thing to admit. But let's keep going.
Nathan was there that day. Nathan East was there that day, and he was there this day.
Wow, those notes don't land where I would think they would land, but that sounds really cool.
Let's play it for you in the mix with the drums.
Let's add the context, as we call it. Like, I gotta say,
it's super syncopated.
Yeah,
another
super
interesting thing,
syncopated.
if you notice it sound. It's lower than you would expect a bass guitar because he's either got a 5 or a 6 string. That's a low. He's playing the low B.
A lot of times when we hear these stems, I'm like, oh, I hear another potential song in there. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Like, you're like, oh wait, you could go another direction than that.
And he's
not saying that we will, because we don't snitch and we don't steal.
And he's just dancing around that the whole time. This is a performed part. There's no loops in this track, and it's really fun to listen to the isolated parts because he never plays the same thing twice. It's not even close. He's always finding kind of a new way to hit the note or to go down an octave or up the octave.
What is his name again?
This is Nathan East.
Nathan East, man, killed it.
So that's what 1,499 other people thought when they also recorded him on his way to having all these recordings. So
I'm just learning sometimes.
If you recall on the demo, it was drums, bass, and whirly, really. Obviously, the whirly is still in the mix. The guitar, though, became the hero when Nile Rodgers came into the picture. But there's also a piano and there's a whirly, and let's play those for you now. Woo! And I'll bring back the drums and bass.
just something about an isolated piano. If you like the song and then you isolate the piano part, there's something that gets inside of you.
It's so
when
simple
you hear
too.
just the isolated
And you
piano.
don't need to be fancy about it. Those
No.
chords, these aren't syncopated, funky mellow. These are the actual chords, and they're looping the whole time on the
Yes.
one, on the downbeat. Chord, 2, 3, 4. One chord per bar.
If you
No
if
space.
you like the song, you're
Those are-
gonna love the piano.
Fills up all the space and leaves room for the other instruments, especially our next guy, whose name is Nile Rodgers. You've heard his
Who
name
is that?
15 times on this episode already. He's a very important part of this story. And he comes in and lays down this part. There's actually 3 different parts going in the song. That's the first
I
one.
never noticed that before.
Here's the second one. And I'm going to play you all the instruments together, and you can hear how they come together. Drums. With bass. So Nile Rodgers, as we mentioned, he came up with those 3 guitar parts, or he says he came up with 3 guitar parts. He also apparently is on this track with Paul Jackson Jr., who's also on Beat It and PYT and Dirty Diana. So between the 2 of them, all the guitar you just heard is created and made. There's a quote that I found where Nile Rodgers refers to him coming up with the rhythm that Pharrell used for the hook. And I think it's that ba 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 ba. I'll play it again. So you can kind of hear there's
a little mirroring between what Pharrell's singing and the
you can
guitar
tell that
part.
Pharrell listened to that and that clearly inspired his phrasing, the rhythm for his hook.
I mean, you've got 3 different eras of some of the coolest song makers of all time in the studio recording songs. It's no wonder why it's such a big hit. Yeah,
exactly. Well, that brings us right to Pharrell. Pharrell's in Paris and is told that Daft Punk wants to meet with him. So they get together.
Not what happened when I went to Paris.
No, it's not what happened.
Nobody came up to me and was like, "Hey, Daft Punk wants to meet with you."
That's not
They
very
were like,
common
"Can we see your
experience.
passport?" But that was
Not
about
a very
it.
common experience.
No.
No, it's true. When they met up, Pharrell mentioned that he was listening to a lot of Chic and Nile Rodgers, and that was the mood he was in. And Daft Punk was like, "You've got to be kidding me. We just happened to have these tracks we just recorded with him." So the kismet of it all, right? The cosmicness of like, wow, came together in that moment where they played him the tracks. Pharrell records them. But what's interesting is that he didn't realize that what he was writing and recording, because he wrote the melody, he wrote the lyrics, and he recorded his vocal, assuming it was a guide for some other singer. So he didn't realize that he was going to be on the final version. Apparently, it all happens in an hour. It's Daft Punk, so it's very secretive. He's not even given a work tape to listen to. So an hour later, he leaves the studio and gradually forgets that what the song was. So a year later, when he listens back to it, and there's this great video footage on YouTube of this moment, he hears the song, and it's like completely fresh to him. He'd completely forgotten everything he'd done that day, and he had no idea that he would be on it. So it's pretty incredible. Just going to play the vocal.
Like the legend of the phoenix, all ends with beginnings. What keeps the planet spinning? The force from the beginning. Love.
I love that. La. I love that they kept that in. Just this little rhythm, like kind of a little Michael Jackson thing. Like,
Love.
Yeah. Look.
Look. They left that. That wasn't muted. Well, let's talk about hook number 2, the We've Come So Far hook. Here's Pharrell with several Pharrells behind him.
We've come too far to give up who we are. So let's raise the bar and our cups to the stars.
So beautiful. Pharrell talks about how perfectionist they were in the studio with him and how that wasn't his regular way. I think normally he would, especially because he thought he was writing for someone else.
Right.
So the need for perfection in his mind was like, why are we doing this
Why
so
are we
many
doing
times?
this so many times?
I guess Daft Punk were like, we are using Pharrell. Listen to that. This is
That's
incredible,
hilarious.
right?
And then they present him with a gift after a year. I love to think of these 3 entities, we'll say, because it's 4 guys, but these entities coming together to create such a great song. And I
Right.
do believe that the lyrics, I should say, they're open to interpretation. Obviously, there's the whole get lucky in terms of like having sex. I think Pharrell has said, to him, the song is about when you meet somebody for the first time and it immediately clicks and then you get to go home with them.
Yeah.
That's something that apparently happens in Pharrell's life, not often for the rest of us.
But his psyche must have also a little bit been thinking how lucky that I've met Daft Punk and they mention Nile Rodgers and I'm in a Nile mood. I wonder if that wasn't a little part of it too.
Well, I'll take it a step further. I think subconsciously, I when I hear these lyrics, when I hear like the legend of the Phoenix, all ends with beginnings.
Oh, wow.
I see Daft Punk coming towards the end of their career and the beginning of something else.
But
like
Pharrell couldn't have known that at the time.
I don't think he could have. But and by the way, Pharrell always talks about like he thinks that the Phoenix is the story of the Phoenix anyway is like his sort of like creative lodestar. Like he's like, you can't hold on to past glory. You always have to burn it all down, and then the embers is the egg of a new Phoenix.
That's such a great creative philosophy, and I know he brings that with him into the studio. I know that he's very in touch with being present and not sort of attempting to like have an agenda. Just like, where is this music taking me?
And not trying to go towards the Neptune
not trying to control it.
of 2002.
Yeah,
he's
not trying to control the muse, is what I mean.
By the way, I also love the president has no ribbon.
That's
the verse too. The president has no ribbon, which to me says like you may not get your flowers right now.
I really had to think about that. That is so much deeper
Obviously,
than I
a
noticed.
President comes with a bow and a ribbon.
Getting that right now. Nice. Love it.
Again, I mean, like Pharrell said, this song is about hooking up with somebody you met the same day. But I think
it's also about these deeper things.
I like to think it's about some of these deeper things too. You know what? Next time I'm in Paris, I'm going to reach out to Pharrell too and be like, Diallo wants to meet you.
No, I'm still turning over. The present has no rhythm. Excuse me.
No ribbon. Ribbon?
Okay, I can't say this word. I'm also turning
the
over.
President has no ribbon.
The president has no rhythm.
The president has no rhythm. Well,
it's famous
some
lyrics.
could argue.
Famous lyrics.
But the president has no ribbon. It's fun.
The president has no ribbon is great. That's a wonderful, wonderful lyric.
I also love the line, we've come too far to give up who we are.
Right.
And I think that goes back to Daft Punk as well. It's like, we've come so far, but we're not going to stop being Daft Punk. And we're going to challenge you.
I hear it as we're going to let go.
Huh?
We are giving up who we are, is the irony of this.
I think we've come too far to give up who we are.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, you're right. But at the same time, because this is their last record, maybe they didn't know
I don't think they're
time.
giving up who they are.
I'm exploring this with you.
I don't think they're giving up who they are.
They're not giving up who they are. They may be giving up their sonic direction. Right, because this is a completely new.
Okay, so
but that's not the core of who they are.
Let's talk about that.
That's a very Zen. That's a very Buddhist thing.
Exactly.
I love that.
Okay, so let me make a case.
Yeah.
When they first burst onto the scene, one reason why the name punk is in their name was that it wasn't that they. Yeah, sometimes they dress like rock stars, but their idea, and this is where hip hop has always been kind of punk to me. Their idea was like, there's nothing we can't do if we want to do it.
Right.
Right. So if we want to make music that nobody else is making, that's one of the things that
it's punk rock, man. DIY.
That I think it was called Jockey Slut was the magazine that interviewed them first. They're like, these are guys who aren't playing by anybody else's rules, not the dance rules, definitely not by any indie rock rules. And I think that this album, which sounds nothing like any other Daft Punk album, is another way of them saying, we've come too far to give up who we are. Are you coming to Random Access Memories with us? Are you going to go down this path of these songs and this era that influenced us? Everything from Paul Williams to The Strokes to Pharrell.
All that's true.
Yeah.
But also remember, Pharrell Williams wrote those lyrics and sang them. That's another connection to him being tapped into something that was maybe in the room or in the conversation, or maybe they had alluded to it. I don't think they had. I don't know that when they were making this record, they knew that it would be the end. Maybe they did.
They're French speaking.
But the magic of songwriting and the magic of art is that somehow that is true of Daft Punk, and yet Pharrell
I will say
this
is one of those times I'm going to put on the hat of I'm the audience, I'm the receiver of the art.
Yeah.
The way the music sounds, the way that the lyrics sort of relate back to the path that Daft Punk's been on, even though they did not write them, to me all came together as a person who was absorbing this art as like making a very cohesive statement about, not giving up, your artistic identity. Again, across the board, they always protected themselves, whether it was the image of their actual face to their album art to the sound that they brought on every single album. We didn't talk that
That's
much
well
about
said, yeah.
Human After All, but Human After All was sort of a dark, aggressive album compared to the two albums before it.
It's
and the album that came after.
their not their best record by any means. It might be it's my least favorite, I'll say.
That's
but
interesting.
yeah. What were you,
I don't know. I don't know that it's my least favorite.
really?
Because there are some songs on that album that I think are just absolutely. I always said I wanted to start off my DJ set. If I ever get the chance to do Coachella or some major music festival, the song that I'm going to start off with, I made this promise to myself, is off of Human After All.
Which one?
I'll play a snippet, and it is a song that I have loved from the first time I heard it. This is Steam Machine, and I always thought it would be the most epic start to any DJ set I ever get to do in front of a lot of people. Here we go.
I just can't. I can't take that. Like I can't even listen in the room. That record came out. I had one listen the whole way through, and that was it for me. I got to say, no shade. We love this band. We're allowed to not love bits and pieces of the band.
Absolutely.
But I love that you love that song. And there's one more hook, arguably the most important. I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you pick best hooks?
She's up all night to the sun. I'm up all night to get some. She's up all night for good fun. I'm up all night to get lucky.
I love that. It's a great chorus. Can you play for us when the robots come in?
Oh, I'm glad you asked.
We're up all night to get. That's when we get back to the repetitious robot voice that's saying around the world. One more time, like, it's that repetition that we love so much. I'd love to hear them saying, we're up all night to get.
There is no doubt that this is the best part of the song, so I'm going to give it to you.
We're up all night to get. We're up all night to get. We're up all night to get. We're up all night to get lucky.
That's the best part.
That part is so good.
Which just proves that I'm a OG Daft Punk fan.
I remember the first time I heard Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, I was already loving the album.
Yeah.
But when they get into the Zab and Roger part of that song, it didn't surprise me when Kanye sampled it. That to me was like
the talk box.
Like, oh my God, it's so good.
Everyone loves the talk box / vocoder. The line is thin in this track, I got to tell you. I hear vocoders, but I also hear stuff you can do with the talk box. Not really sure. I know they had a lot. I'm pretty sure it's vocoder.
But to our listeners,
it's very talk box.
It's not, guys. It's not auto-tune. And one of these days we're going to do a segment called vocoder, talk box, auto-tune, and we're going to lay it out why you can tell the difference. I mean, there's so much you could talk about here. But if you think about this song as sort of being the bookend of Daft Punk's career, all ends with beginnings.
Right.
But then you also think about the Legend of the Phoenix. Well, they were in a band called Darling,
right?
With
Phoenix.
A guy who went off and founded a group called Phoenix. I mean, there's a lot of
no
stuff.
way.
So
That's
you literally
so
have from
crazy.
Darling to Get Lucky, this idea of a Phoenix, and I do think the Daft Punk think that they are lucky because I think that they think that they're talented.
But the fact that Pharrell is the one who wrote those lyrics,
I know,
and it maps to their story is pretty incredible.
I mean,
I think you're right with that analysis.
Maybe they just know, but
but that's just how art works too.
But sometimes
Pharrell is so in touch. He's so in touch with the muse. He's so in touch with. He's one of my idols creatively. So many of our idols creatively, and it seems very possible that he was just in touch with something very special.
It gives me chills because I do think of this as the swan song of Daft Punk. If they ever get back together and do something, we know Thomas is doing or released a classical album, and who knows what Guy-Man might do in the future. But to real Daft Punk fans, Get Lucky is sort of it is the end of a beginning.
Yeah,
and we'll have to see what comes after that. Can I play you a part off the remix that a lot of people don't know that Daft Punk did a remix to Get Lucky. It's about 12 minutes long, and there's a part that comes in where they sort of vary it up in a way that I don't think anybody saw coming. I've never heard another DJ spin this. Even I have probably only spun it twice in my entire time DJing. But I just want to play it while I have your attention. Here's a flip of the song that I think is really special. Check this out.
She's up all night to the sun. I'm up all night to get some. She's up all night for good fun. We're up all night to get lucky.
I just love how they flip that part.
It's so basic. They just they dropped one chord and reversed three of them.
And they're doing
the chord it's reharmonized. And so the chord changes are surprising, and then they sort of like rearrange
They
where things
rearrange
happen.
it. It's coming in a different time pattern.
Yeah.
Like it's not where that part comes in naturally on the song. It's almost like one of those things that might have been a mistake at some point. But
Yeah.
they're like, oh, and they kind of loop that part for about like 3 or 4 minutes, but like,
And then the whole thing is 10.5 minutes long.
It's like, I just love that part. And it's like a part that didn't make the cut on the original song.
It's a crazy remix, though, that it's like just flipping the chords backwards and dropping one of them and extending it for 10.5 minutes like that.
For those who want to check it out, it's the Daft Punk remix of Get Lucky. Like I said, it's about a 11-minute song, but this part only begins around 8 minutes and 23 seconds. So you kind of have to be listening to the song to even get to it. But when it comes in, it's a wonderfully, why do I keep thinking about caramel? It's a sugary sweet section of the song that you may not know is there. Go find it. Listen to it.
My man is hungry.
So Daft Punk have been sampled many times, many times, and they've also sampled many times. I just want to pause for a minute so we can talk about their sampling techniques. Luxury, Ram does not have a lot of sampling on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny to talk about a Daft Punk song without there being any samples. There are no samples or interpolations in this song. In fact, this entire album only has a single song that has 2 samples on
just
it.
one sample.
There's just one song with samples on it. It's the last song on their last ever album. I'll play it for you now. The song is called Contact. And that comes from a song by the Sherbs, an Australian band. From 1982, the song is called We Ride Tonight. So that's just straight up. It's from the song. It's in the same key. Nothing's altered about it. There's also a pretty cool sample. They got the rights from NASA to use some of the communications from the Apollo 17 final moon mission. So Captain Eugene Cernan is also on the track. The last man to leave the surface of the moon, perhaps symbolically, as Daft Punk leaves the rest of us to go into their next orbit.
Absolutely.
So that's the one sample on their final record. In fact, technically speaking, they hadn't used any samples other than Contact since 2005.
But they are some of my favorite samplers of all time in the sense that, like, I put them right up there with DILLAO, DJ Premier. You know, I just feel like some people elevate the art of sampling to such a degree, and they are absolutely in that category.
I couldn't agree more. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some samples on some earlier records. And so these are some of the more famous samples. Now, it must be said that there are 10 gajillion sample breakdown videos all over the internet
on
about
Instagram,
them. So we don't want to we don't want to recreate the reel too much, but we are going to do something special.
But we are going to recreate something.
We're going to recreate something. We're going to recreate how these samples got made. So one just quick thing to talk about is when we listen, you're going to hear some samples where it is pretty much what was used in the Daft Punk song will sound dramatically similar to the original song. Part of what makes them creative, though, is not simply the choice of track to sample. That's part of the art of sampling. It's also how they combine full loops, sometimes 2 or 4 bar loops of the song, with these little borderline micro samples, I'd call them. And that's going to lead us.
I like to call them chops.
Call them chops, which leads, we're going to play a couple of those first, and then we'll lead to the ultimate micro sample, world champion micro sampling song of all time. But we'll get to that in a minute. First, let's start with Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger from 2001. And the sample is from Edwin Birdsong's 1979 track, Cola Bottle Baby. First, I'll play a little bit of that. So here's how they chopped it up. That little bit right there, and also this full loop.
Power, baby.
Is it that little bit that I said was a little bit? So those 2 little bits are used kind of as a setup. The repetition is used before we get that big 4 bar loop. So here's how Daft Punk did it. It's interesting how they use these little fragments
Yeah.
to kind of give it the repetition that actually makes it very modern sounding, first of all. It's not just the wholesale loop of an entire bar.
No.
And then you really feel like there's a DJ kind of factor going into it. You're really hearing the computer doing its job.
Yeah.
And it's super satisfying. What's interesting too is that those are, so you have a half bar, dun dun, a half bar, 1 1 2 1 2 1 1 1 1.
Yeah.
That was very innovative
And by
use of sampling.
It is innovative, but it's also a little bit like how we were saying how when you bring in like the filter that the DJs use. I mean, like as a DJ, I know that the second we figured out what cue points were and they started playing cue
to do
points,
that, don't you?
You start doing that, and you hope that the audience doesn't get annoyed with you if you do too much. I want to play a song similarly sampled. This is "I Love You More" by George Duke. I think you'll figure out what song they use for this.
Totally different song.
I would argue that they made that song better. No offense to George Duke fans. No offense to George Duke.
But they found, to your point, they find a little section of it, which maybe
They
isn't
do,
even the
and
core
here's
of
the
the
weirdest
song.
thing. This is something I don't think I've ever read this anywhere, but I think we're all sort of thinking it. The way that they sample this stuff, and I think it's because of the visual of these robots. It sounds robotic, but then when you hear the original song, you're like, oh, those are actually a bunch of black funk musicians. Like, it doesn't necessarily sound at all robotic.
Right.
But the way that they sample it and loop it, all of a sudden you're like, that sounds like a robot.
They give it a robot twist,
It's
and they're
weird.
balancing the analog, the digital and the analog, the vinyl like sample itself, the sample
Like,
source
even-
with the computer that's
Yes.
chopping it up.
Yeah.
It's a balancing act.
It is.
Human
but
and robot.
To me, it's always like,
Human,
if
human,
you
robot,
actually hear
robot.
the song, like they haven't changed that much, and yet when they use it, it sounds robotic, and when you hear the original, it doesn't sound robotic. It's really weird. Let's do the next one. I'm excited to hear, because there are some times when I feel like they barely changed the song at all.
I know exactly what you're talking about. This one's kind of funny because aside from this intro, you're mostly just getting a big old loop. So here's what Daft Punk did. So first off, sick tune. That's
Great song.
The song that's
We liked
Robot
it.
Rock that opens.
It was very
Human After All
repetitious. It was very repetitious when we heard it, but we did like it.
We did like it. Probably my favorite song on Human After All. But when you hear Breakwater's Release the Beast,
Then you're
let
like,
me know if you
wait,
hear anything
what?
familiar. There's that song again. Now, of course, Daft Punk added the rock, robot. So it's not without changes,
No.
but they are minimal.
But I think, once we all discovered Release the Beast by Breakwater, I will say, this is no diss to the robots, I do prefer Breakwaters because there's that wonderful funk breakdown towards the end, which goes like this. Like, that is next level funk right there. my
It's
friend.
so good. The original is incredible. And here's how they did it. So now that you've heard both, I'll start with that drum fill, which they chopped up and just repeated 8 times in a row. Whoops. And then
This is why you're not in Daft Punk. No, that's
and then
cool,
they took
though.
that guitar.
Yeah.
There's 2 guitar hits, and they pitched one up, and they just repeated one and went to the next one.
Yeah.
And then they go into the loop.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty simple chop, but it does something important to it. Which is fun to play.
I will say, I usually will rag on groups for not changing songs enough.
Yeah.
But I can't rag on them because I'm like, I would have never heard of some of these songs. The same thing they did there, they did with the song called Can You Imagine by Little Anthony and the Imperials. Check this song out. This might be the one time I don't think Daft Punk actually improved the song, because I think the original song, once I heard it, I was like, that is fucking cool. Now, check this out. The song
waiting
that
for the
Daft
drop.
Punk sampled that for is called Crescent Dolls. I think all of us thought they were saying Crescent Dolls, but they're actually singing Imperials, because the name of the group is Lil Anthony and the Imperials. Does that make sense? So they say Imperials, but it's just like how
I thought it was
talking
Ain't a
about,
Funky Y'all.
we were talking about Tawate and how Phife Dawg changed the lyric to suit the purposes. The fact that we thought that they were saying Crescent Dolls, but they were saying Imperials is really cool. You got to check out that song.
Yeah.
Lil Anthony and the Imperials, Can You Imagine? It's a really cool song. All right, I think we're going to do one more of these sampling techniques.
Let's do one more. This is One More Time from 2001, which, if you recall, sounds like this. And I'll play for you where that comes from. And now I will show you how they chopped it. And then it just goes right into
One more time.
Yeah, rest in peace, Roman Anthony, great singer.
And we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Daft Punk's sampling techniques and not mention Face to Face, one of the all-time greats. If you
even to see it visually represented, how they chop this up, it still barely makes sense. It's insane.
That's right. There are 20, no fewer than I should say. There are no fewer than 20 samples. This is a track that they collaborated with Todd Edwards, the great Todd the God, as they call him. One of the greats, a pioneer of myco-sampling. Him and MK, and among others, were
Todd
some
Edwards
of the earliest
insane.
to use this idea of taking
not French, from New Jersey, I believe.
Todd Edwards is from New Jersey. That's right. I believe he lives in LA. I've met him a few times.
Yeah.
I've DJed with him a couple times.
Oh, wow.
Really sweet guy.
Yeah.
And he is a big part of the Daft Punk journey. He's on Face to Face. It's his voice. He worked with Thomas to come up with all the samples. They both had 70, apparently, 140 total samples that they ended up with about 20 for the final version. And he's also on the record Random Access Memories. He's the one singing and co-writing the song Fragments of Time.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
So this song is called Face to Face. It's from Discovery 2001.
Insane song.
No fewer than 20 samples. This is not the time or place to go through all 20, but I'll play one or two of my favorites. First off, here's the song Face to Face. So what you just heard is, remember all the little micro, half bar, quarter bar, all those things that together became Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, Robot Rock, etc. That's happening times 5 or so, because there's about a half dozen, maybe 8, just that little chunk, 20 across the song. Here's one of them. See if you can hear it. This is from Evil Woman by Electric Light Orchestra. Yep. It's a fragment that's part of that larger thing you just heard. That's one of the easiest to hear. Yeah.
You know what's funny about this song? There's so many samples that we could go into on this song. I always thought it was an interpolation or a sample or something. I Want to Be Your Lover by Prince. The two songs, if you put them together, they sound so much alike. But it's like, oh yeah, do it sometime in your free time. Put these two songs together. As a DJ, I would take all the bass out of the Prince song, leave in his vocal, and then take all the vocal out of this song and leave in the music, so to
nice.
speak.
They mixed together.
They
Similar
sounded perfect.
beat,
So I was
tempo.
always sure there was a Prince connection. When I finally saw the songs that they sampled and realized that they'd put together this song, it was kind of insane.
Well, there's more to this song. Go online. There's a lot of wonderful breakdowns, but that's Face to Face, one of my favorite Daft Punk songs altogether with Todd Edwards.
Since you've named your favorite Daft Punk song of all time, I will say that my favorite, I think at the end of the day, maybe played at my funeral. Voyager by Daft Punk. It's just a perfect.
That's a beautiful song. Also from Discovery. Yeah. That's my favorite record. That's the best Daft Punk record, let's face it. But we love Get Lucky and we love Random Access Memories.
Before we leave this subject alone, I do want to play one song that is like hip hop has always tried to sample Daft Punk. It has rarely been successful in my point of view. I did like Touch It by Busta Rhymes. I thought that was one of the best uses. That song used to go so hard in the club, sampled Technologic.
Yeah.
Obviously, Harder, Better. I didn't love it as much as everybody. It became Stronger by
Kanye West.
Kanye. Didn't like it as much as the original, but just liked that it was on his radar. But to me, the best sampling of Daft Punk by hip hop was one of the very first. It is Raise It Up by Slum Village. I'm actually going to start with a song that I'm going to start with the sampling song, Raise It Up, produced by Dilla. And then I'm going to play the Daft Punk song that it's sampled because a lot of people don't know it. So this is Raise It Up, a little quick snippet.
Turn it up. New SV. Raise it up. 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 Raise it up.
And here is the song it samples. It's actually a Thomas Bang Alter song called Extra Dry from his Roulette label. Check this out. So at some point, Dilla heard that song and was like, oh, yeah, I fucked with that.
That was sick. That was sick.
We could do a whole episode on just the hip-hop songs that sampled, Daft Punk, but we are pretty much out of time. Luxury, this has been an absolute joy. Help me in this thing.
All right. Well, I'm producer, DJ, and songwriter Luxury.
And I'm actor, writer, and happily robot DJ Diallo Riddle.
And this has been One Song. We will see you next week. Don't forget to give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a nice review and tell all your friends. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time. You can find us on Instagram at Diallo, Diallo for me.
And I'm at Luxury, LUXXURY.
And on TikTok, I'm at Diallo Riddle.
And at TikTok, I'm at LuxuryXX.
I like that you got both.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Thanks so much, guys.